Hey everybody, happy Monday. Thanks for tuning into This Girl's Worth. I just wanted to share with you guys the importance of sharing your story. Now, I know that some of us have been through some things and we've done some things that we don't want to talk about. I know personally, me, when I look back on my own experiences, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And there's a lot of shame there. Or sometimes there are things that happened in childhood that I don't want to talk about because there's a lot of shame there. And growing up with feeling like I don't want to talk about this because it brings shame or it brings regret or it brings feelings of guilt. When you carry that weight with you, that secrets, it does something to you. It changes who you are at your core. It makes you hardened and bitter and afraid of the world. It makes you afraid of judgment. And it creates this dynamic where you grow up, not just in your childhood, but even as an adult, you learn to live in secret. You live not with the full honesty of who you are and transparency of who you are because you're afraid of rejection. And I did that for a long time as a child. When I was bullied and I had been violated, I didn't want to talk about those experiences because I felt like they represented something about me. And I felt like if I shared those experiences and I talked about them, then that meant that there was something wrong with me and I was finally admitting it. And it wasn't until I had the courage to talk to my mother about these things later on that I recognized like I was accepted and loved for who I was despite these experiences that happened to me. And as I became an adult, I made mistakes. There are certain things that I did and I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. But when I gave myself the opportunity to be human and I had the courage to finally talk about it, the first time really talk about it and be honest about some of the things that I've done and things that I was confused about or mistakes that I made and things that happened to me was when I was involved in that romantic relationships. For most of us, that's the first time that we ever really do share our story. For most of us, we go around and we kind of pretend that everything's okay because we're trying to survive. That's the best that we know how. And then we get into these romantic relationships and we want someone to accept us for who we are. And so we share these personal details about ourselves. We share these things about our stories, and it can be freeing and liberating. And some of us don't ever share our stories. Some of us don't ever share those things about ourselves that we're embarrassed to talk about because we're afraid we'll be judged, we won't be accepted, that we're going to rock the boat, we're going to mess up the family structure, we're going to break the foundation. And what I want to say to you is, it is so important that you share your story with at least one person on this earth other than yourself. God gave us and created human beings to connect and to share our burdens. And so it's really important that you don't carry the weight of your mistakes. You don't carry the weight of what you went through. You don't carry the weight of the things people did to hurt you all by yourself. It is so important that you allow someone to accept you and love you fully for who you are by truly and authentically sharing every version of you. Now, I'm not advocating for you to go around the world and tell everybody your mistakes and tell everybody how you've been hurt and to play the victim or to have a self-pity party. I'm not telling you that. What I am saying, though, is that if you're the kind of person that has taken everything in, you don't share that you're in an abusive relationship, you don't share anything about yourself, you just keep it all in and you internalize it and you're falling and you're breaking apart because that's what secrets do to us. That's what not sharing our story, that's what not living in truth and honesty does to us. It eats at our very core. Because our bodies and everything about us is saying like something is wrong here. And a lot of us do it. We tuck things down on the inside. We're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to share our stories out of being judged. And I'm not telling you to share your story with everybody. That's too much of a burden to bear. That's too much to initially start off the gate wanting to do, to share your story with everybody. You might eventually reach that point or you might never reach that point. But what I want to say to you and give you the courage to do is share your story. Find that one person that you can actually trust and believe that they're going to accept you with full faith. And knowing that when you share your story, you own it 100%. That's your story to own. That even if you're not accepted when you decide to tell your story, that you feel much better because you're walking in honesty and truth. We as human beings are not meant to walk around pretending that everything's okay and pretending everything's fine and pretending to move past things. Whether we like it or not, our experiences have weight on us, and it's only after we take control and ownership of our experiences by sharing them from a place of empowerment that we're able to move forward. In the Christian community, we call that a testimony. It's about how God has moved you through something, how God has delivered you past a particular place. But if you're quite not at the place where you feel like it's a testimony just yet, at least share your struggle with somebody, whether that's a therapist, a coach, a pastor, a trusted friend, a family member, your mom or your dad. It's so important that you do not carry the weight of that by yourself. If you've made a mistake, it's important you don't carry the weight of that mistake by yourself. If you have something that happened to you, it's important you don't carry that by yourself. And maybe I do recognize not everybody has a community where they can always talk to people about what they're going through. Then therapy might be a great option for you. Or if you don't have therapy, then at least be honest with God. Some of us are not even having conversations with God. We're not even talking to God in our prayers about the things that are on our heart. Have a conversation and be like, you know what? I don't understand how this happened. I'm confused, God. I need to talk to you about it. It's so important that we don't carry that burden. It's so important that we come to God with the things that we're going through. It's so important that we give people an opportunity to love us wholeheartedly despite our struggles, because the right person is going to love you no matter what. You're going to bring things to them and they're going to be like, oh, that's all? After I shared certain aspects of my story, and of course I don't talk about every single thing. No human being on this planet does, because sometimes we want to keep things to ourselves. That's your right to privacy. But there's a difference between being private and there's a difference between letting something just eat you up on the inside. And when it's eating you up on the inside, when it's affecting your ability to experience life to the fullest and with joy, the joy that God intended for us, then it might be because you need to lay that burden off of you. You need to rest it somewhere else. You need to give it to God. And sometimes God lets us tell our story through other people, and it can be healing for us and transformative for us. So whether or not you're finding a support group, you're talking through a chat, you're talking with a pastor, you're talking with a therapist, you find a friend to talk to, you're talking to your mom or your dad or an aunt or an uncle or someone that you trust, just make sure that you don't leave this earth without sharing your story with somebody and giving them an opportunity to love you and accept you fully for who you are. Because it's not your burden to bear alone. And even if it happened to you, whether that is being violated or being bullied, or maybe you are in an abusive relationship, or maybe you were fired from a job and you're truly financially struggling, or maybe you're dealing with a health condition that you don't want to tell anyone about, that burden will weigh on you. It'll make you sick. It'll stress you out. You will never experience the joy that's intended for your life living in a secret. And so I want you to remember that it's okay that sometimes we have things that we're ashamed of. When we don't tell the truth about situations, it creates and it just builds and festers this amount of shame and guilt on the inside. And then we go about life expecting to be rejected, so we hide ourselves. I want you to live life to the best ability. I don't want you to go through life hiding yourself out of fear or fear of shame. A fear of shame. That's why we keep secrets, because of fear of shame. So I want you to live in truth and honesty, and knowing that there is someone out there who will hear your story and will accept you and love you exactly where you are. And if you can't find that in your family community, because some people don't have it, you have therapy, you have online support groups, you have support groups in person who will listen to your story and will hear you out. I'm here if you ever want to share your story with me. You can always connect with me on Instagram at This Girl's Worth. Send me a DM. I will listen to your story. I will be there for you. It's so important that we share. It's so important. And I know that, I would have been the first person to tell you a long time ago, when I was still operating in a lot of shame and secrets, that you don't need to tell everyone everything. And you don't. But it was coming from a place of shame, of me not wanting to deal with what I was experiencing. And so as you live in truth and honesty, and you don't let those things eat you up on the inside anymore, and you actually get the support that you need to move forward, then recognize that it is a journey, and it is a place that you have to come from, of being completely and totally vulnerable. But don't be afraid of being vulnerable. Being vulnerable is a beautiful thing. Being vulnerable is what allows us to experience life to the fullest capacity. It allows us to feel God's love to the fullest capacity. So I pray that for you. I pray that whatever has been heavy on your heart, that you share it with someone, that you share it with someone who you know and you trust. If you don't have someone, God can supply all of our needs, so talk to God about it. Even the things that you're shameful, and ask God to give you direction on how to heal from those things. Not to take them away, but ask God how to heal from those things, so that you can truly live life to the fullest. A lot of us carry secrets. A lot of us carry things we're ashamed of. A lot of us carry things that we're afraid of talking about, because we don't want to be judged, because we want to be accepted, we want to be loved. That's all human beings. We want to be loved and accepted, and we don't want to be judged for who we are. But you're not your mistakes. You're not the things that happen to you. You're not the things that are happening to you. You're not your pain. You're not the depression you're experiencing. You're not your anxiety. You're not the bullying that happened to you. You're not the sexual violation that happened to you. You're not those secret addictions or those secret things that you struggle with. That's not your identity. Those are things that are not who you are. And when you add light into dark places, you allow God to do his work in those places. So allow light in by sharing the truth of your story and not wanting to hide and pretend to be anything that you're not. Because trust me, who you are already, no matter the mistake, no matter the thing that happened, is good enough. It's already good enough. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Hopefully it was encouraging for you. Hopefully it blessed you. Hopefully it gave you the courage that you need to live in your truth and to share your story, to find support. To find support if you're in a place where you have been isolated and you haven't allowed yourself to find support. I encourage you to do what you can to find that support. And if you don't have that support, know that God is there for you. God gives us people, and then sometimes God is always all that we need, but sometimes God gives us the people in our lives that we can have healing relationships through those people, and sometimes God himself has to fill in the gap for us. God is always the center of everything. God is already enough, and he is in our life, but I do want to acknowledge that sometimes God gives us people who show us God's love, and then sometimes we get it directly from God. And sometimes in sharing our story, you might not have the support from the outer world to accept you, so you have to share it with God. Get comfortable with God, embrace that story with God, and then God will lead you to the people who accept you in fullness and truth of your story. We don't want to live in shame and guilt, because God has already redeemed us through the cross. And so when we carry that burden, when we carry our own crosses, instead of recognizing that God has already done that part for us, he has already wiped us of shame and guilt. And it's hard. It's very, very hard to recognize that and to come to that place. But that's your truth. That is your story. And as a child of God, you have a right to be able to share your story. And so I pray that you know that your story is valid, that whatever pain you're experiencing and the shame and the guilt behind it, that fear, that anxiety, all of it is 100% real. But it's not who you are. You are more than that experience. You are more than that shame. You are way more than that guilt. You are way more than those mistakes. You're way more than the things that people did to hurt you. Those things have nothing to do with the trueness of who you are and the fullness of who God has created you to be. So I love you, and I will talk to you soon. I have a few episodes. People have been asking me questions about narcissistic abuse. So while I wanted to focus more so on mental health in this time and things like that, like this video, we will be talking about some discussion topics on narcissism, so stay tuned for those videos that will be uploaded between today and tomorrow. So again, I hope that you're having an amazing day, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye.